A rancher, desperate for milk, found an Apache woman. She fed the child and became his family. Western, the sun rose slowly over the vast, dusty plains of the Western Ranch, casting a warm golden light over the small wooden cabin where Tom Hawkins lived. He stood outside, leaning on the wooden fence that separated his small herd of cows from the open prairie. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life or hope. The land was dry, the grass sparse, and the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and earth. For a man who had spent his whole life working the land, mornings like this were heavy with worry. Tom's mind was filled with thoughts of his newborn son, Samuel. The tiny baby had been born only a few days ago, but already Tom felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him harder than the sun's rays. Samuel was weak, crying often and refusing to nurse from the family's only cow. The cow had given milk reliably for years, but now, as if sensing the urgency in the Hawkins household, she had stopped. Tom had tried everything he knew: gentle coaxing, warming the milk, even changing the cow's feed, but nothing worked. His heart ached every time he saw his son's tiny body shivering in the crib, and his motherly instinct to protect him felt useless. Inside the cabin, the room smelled faintly of hay, soap, and the lingering scent of smoke from the fireplace. The baby lay swaddled in a thin blanket, his small fists clenching and unclenching. Tom's wife, Mary, sat in the rocking chair, humming softly, but her voice trembled with worry. She was pale, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid, and her eyes were heavy with sleepless nights. Every hour seemed to stretch into an eternity, and the fear of losing their child clung to the room like a shadow. Tom moved closer to the crib, brushing a hand gently over Samuel's tiny head. "It's okay, little one," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if the words would reach the baby's ears. "We'll figure something out." He had always been a man of action, used to solving problems with his hands and his mind, but this problem felt bigger than anything he had faced before. There were no simple solutions. No amount of hard work could make a baby drink milk that wasn't there. He glanced around the cabin, taking in the small details of their life. The furniture was simple: wooden chairs, a table scarred with years of use, a few shelves holding pots, pans, and jars of preserved fruits. On the wall hung a faded photograph of Tom's father, a man with a stern face and calloused hands, standing proudly with a pitchfork. Tom had inherited the ranch from his father, along with the sense of duty to keep it running no matter the cost. But now, standing there, he realized that all the lessons of hard work in the world could not replace what his son needed most: milk. He stepped outside again, taking a deep breath of the dry, open air. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted with wild flowers and tufts of grass. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks sharp and rugged against the sky. Tom had ridden these lands since he was a boy, knew every hill, every stream, every hidden patch of water. But today, the land offered no comfort. It was a harsh place, beautiful in its own way, but unforgiving when life demanded more than it could give. He walked toward the small barn, hoping that maybe the cow would surprise him, give a drop of milk he could use. The cow stood quietly in the stall, chewing her cud with an almost indifferent expression. Tom knelt beside her, running his hands along her warm sides. "Come on, girl," he murmured. "Just a little, for the baby." He tried to milk her by hand, as he had so many times before. The familiar rhythm of his hands against her hide brought a sense of calm, but when he lifted the pail, it was empty. Not a single drop. His shoulders slumped. For a moment, despair threatened to take hold. He could feel the weight of it pressing down. heavy as the iron tools in the shed. He had faced storms, broken fences, lost cattle, and harsh winters, but nothing had ever made him feel as helpless as seeing his baby struggle to survive. The idea of traveling to town for help crossed his mind, but it was miles away, too far for a newborn to endure the journey. He shook his head, trying to push the thought away. There had to be another way. Tom sat on the edge of the barn's wooden ramp, wiping sweat from his brow. He thought of Mary and the way she tried to hide her tears, the way her hands trembled whenever she held Samuel. He thought of his neighbors who had always been kind, but were far too busy with their own farms to help. And then, as the sun climbed higher into the sky, a stubborn determination took hold. He would find a solution himself. Somehow, he decided to follow the creek that ran near the edge of his property, hoping that maybe, just maybe, there might be something there he could use. Water was life in these parts, and often it brought more than just hydration. Wild herbs, small game, and sometimes even strangers passed along its banks. Tom mounted his old horse, Rusty, who had been with him for years, and rode slowly toward the water. The horse moved with steady confidence, as if sensing the weight of his rider's worry. As he followed the winding creek, the air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Birds flitted between the trees, and the sound of running water offered a small comfort. Tom dismounted and walked beside Rusty, keeping his eyes on the banks and listening carefully. It was then that he saw movement. A figure crouched near the water, gathering something in her hands. At first he thought it might be another rancher or a traveler, but as he drew closer he realized it was a woman. Her hair was dark, her clothing simple and practical. She moved with quiet grace, her hands skilled at what she was doing. Tom felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. He had never seen her before, and in these lands, strangers were not always welcome, but something about her calm presence gave him hope. He approached slowly, raising a hand in greeting. "Excuse me," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't mean to trouble you, ma'am, but I need help. My baby, he's very sick, and I can't get milk for him." The woman looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. For a moment she said nothing, just studied him quietly. Then, without a word, she motioned for him to come closer. Tom felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could help. Maybe she had something he could use. As he dismounted and stepped closer to the creek, Tom felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in days. Possibility. For the first time since sunrise, he dared to believe that his baby might survive this day. The woman's presence was quiet, unassuming, yet powerful. He could see that she understood life in a way that words could not express. She had survived this land, as harsh as it was, and perhaps she could help him survive it too. Tom took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Please," he said softly, "anything you can do. I don't know what else to try." The woman nodded once, and Tom noticed the faintest smile touch her lips. It was a small gesture, but it carried warmth, reassurance, and a promise of help. He didn't know her name, didn't know if they would ever meet again, but in that moment he felt the first sense of hope he had in days. The baby's cries still echoed in his mind, but he knew, somehow, that he was not alone in his struggle. And so, as the sun climbed higher and the prairie stretched endlessly around them, Tom Hawkins and the mysterious woman stood together by the creek. The day was still full of uncertainty, but for the first time Tom dared to believe that help had come, and that life might still find a way for his little Samuel. Tom Hawkins felt a cautious sense of hope as he watched the woman work quietly by the creek. Her movements were careful and precise, and she seemed completely in tune with the land around her. He noticed the way she moved her hands over the water, gently gathering something, and the way she observed the surroundings with sharp, alert eyes. Tom had lived on this land his entire life, but there was a calm confidence in her that he had never seen before. It made him feel, for the first time that morning, that maybe, just maybe, his baby might survive. "Are you going to help me?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't want to scare her or appear too desperate, though inside his desperation roared like a storm. The woman looked up at him, and for a moment they simply studied each other. Her eyes were dark and clear, filled with a quiet strength. Then she nodded, slowly, once, as if confirming that yes, she understood, and yes, she would help. Tom felt his chest tighten with relief. This stranger, this woman he had never met before, had agreed to help save his child. She reached into a small leather pouch tied at her waist and brought out a container filled with liquid. Tom didn't recognize it at first, but as he stepped closer, he realized it was fresh milk. Not cow's milk, but goat's milk, warm and sweet-smelling. Tom's heart lifted. Goat's milk might not be exactly what Samuel was used to, but it was life. It was hope in a bottle. Tom lifted Samuel gently from the crib, careful not to jostle him, and carried him outside. The baby's tiny face was pale, and his small body trembled with weakness. Mary followed, her eyes wide with worry and relief as she saw the milk in the woman's hands. Tom handed Samuel to her, and she sat on a nearby bench, holding the baby carefully while the woman leaned close to feed him. The process was slow at first. Samuel's small mouth struggled, and Tom felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. But the woman was patient. She whispered softly to the baby, humming a gentle tune that seemed to calm him. Her hands guided his mouth to the milk, and slowly, almost miraculously, he began to drink. Tom and Mary watched in silence, hardly daring to breathe. Each tiny sip seemed like a victory, each swallow a sign of life returning to their son. Tom felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He had never been so grateful to a stranger in his life. He wanted to thank her, to say something that would express the depth of his gratitude, but words seemed too small for the feeling swelling in his chest. As the baby drank, the woman continued to hum softly. Her presence was calming, almost magical in its way. Tom noticed the small details, the way she adjusted the baby's blanket, the gentle tilt of her head, the warmth in her eyes. She seemed to understand exactly what the baby needed, not just physically, but emotionally, as if she could sense his fear and weakness and knew how to soothe it. When Samuel had finished drinking, he fell asleep in Mary's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily for the first time in what felt like days. Tom exhaled a long, shuddering breath. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a heaviness that had been pressing on him since the moment he realized the cow had stopped giving milk. Now, thanks to this woman, the weight felt lighter. Life had returned to the small cabin, and hope had returned to their hearts. The woman stood quietly, watching the baby sleep. Then she gestured for Tom to follow her toward the edge of the creek. He hesitated for a moment, looking back at Mary and the baby, but the woman's calm, encouraging smile gave him the courage to step forward. She led him to a spot where the water flowed steadily over smooth stones, sparkling in the sunlight. "Water is important," she said softly, her words slow and deliberate, as if choosing them carefully. "Clean water keeps the body strong. The baby needs strong water, not just milk. The land has what you need if you know where to look." Tom nodded, listening carefully. He didn't understand everything she meant, but he could sense that she knew the land in ways he did not. She pointed to small plants growing near the water's edge, explaining which ones could help with nourishment, which leaves were safe, and which roots could be boiled into a drink for energy. Tom followed her instructions closely, feeling a growing admiration for her knowledge and skill. The woman stayed with them throughout the afternoon, helping Mary prepare more milk for the baby, and showing Tom how to make use of the natural resources around the ranch. She taught them how to gather fresh herbs for flavor and nutrition, how to purify water from the creek, and how to read the signs of the land to know where to find food. Her lessons were simple but effective, and Tom realized that he had never truly understood how much the land had to offer until this moment. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the prairie, Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude. The woman had not only saved his child's life, but had also opened his eyes to a new way of living, a new respect for the land that he had called home all his life. He wanted to ask her name to find out who she was, but the words seemed inadequate. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a silent thank you. The woman smiled faintly and gestured toward the cabin. Tom understood that it was time to return. He lifted Samuel carefully from Mary's arms, cradling the baby with a tenderness that made him feel both strong and vulnerable at the same time. Mary followed closely, carrying the remaining milk and herbs. When they reached the cabin, the woman stayed a short distance away, watching as they entered. Tom could feel her presence, steady and reassuring, even as she remained outside. He turned back once, meeting her gaze. She gave a small nod, as if to say, "I will return. I will help when you need it." Then she turned and walked back toward the creek, disappearing into the shadows of the tall grass and trees. Inside the cabin, Tom placed Samuel back in his crib, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of life. Mary sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she brushed a strand of hair from her face. She saved him," Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. Tom nodded, his own voice caught in his throat. "I know," he said softly. "I don't know who she is, but she's remarkable." For the rest of the evening, Tom and Mary prepared a small meal and tended to the baby, but their thoughts kept drifting back to the woman. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had she chosen to help them? Two strangers in the middle of the prairie. They didn't know the answers, but they felt a deep, unshakable sense of gratitude and trust. As night fell, the prairie grew quiet. The wind whispered through the tall grass and the stars shone bright in the clear sky above. Tom sat on the porch, watching the horizon, and felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in days, he felt that the worst was behind them. Samuel was safe, and there was someone out there, watching over them, guiding them, and offering help when it was most needed. He thought about the lessons the woman had taught them, the value of the land, the importance of water and herbs, and the quiet strength of patience and care. He realized that she had given them more than milk for the baby. She had given them knowledge, hope, and the courage to believe that even in the hardest times, help could come from the most unexpected places. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. He promised himself that he would honor her gift, that he would do everything he could to protect his family, and that he would never forget the woman who had appeared at the creek that day, bringing life and hope when it was needed most. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the creek, the woman watched, her heart quietly warmed by the sight of the baby thriving in the safety of his home. She did not speak, did not call, but her presence lingered like a gentle promise, a promise that she would continue to help, to guide, and perhaps in time to become a part of this small family struggling to survive on the vast western prairie. The next morning, Tom Hawkins woke before the sun, as he often did, with the weight of the ranch pressing on him like a stone. But today, the heaviness felt different, lighter, because of the woman who had appeared by the creek the day before. She had given life back to his son Samuel, and in doing so, she had given hope to the whole family. Tom could still hear the faint rhythm of the baby's breathing from the crib, steady and strong. The sight filled him with relief, but also with curiosity. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had she cared so much for strangers? Tom stepped outside and stretched, feeling the cool morning air against his skin. Rusty, his faithful horse, grazed nearby, his ears flicking at the sound of birds awakening. The prairie around the ranch seemed peaceful, almost serene. But Tom knew better. The land was beautiful, yes, but it could be unforgiving. Still, after yesterday, it felt as though a protective hand had touched his family. He hoped it was not just a fleeting feeling. Mary stirred inside the cabin, quietly moving about as she prepared a simple breakfast. She was tired, of course, but there was a light in her eyes that had been missing for days, a spark of hope. When Tom went inside, she greeted him with a small, tired smile. "She's coming back, isn't she?" Mary asked softly, as if the thought alone was a prayer. Tom nodded slowly. "I think she will. She wants to help." I could see it in the way she looked at Samuel. Mary exhaled a breath she had been holding, relief washing over her. The baby stirred in his crib, and Mary lifted him gently, holding him close as if she could protect him simply with her arms. Tom watched her, feeling a swell of gratitude for her strength and patience. He had always admired Mary, but in these last few days he had come to see the depth of her courage, her unspoken determination to keep their family alive. By mid-morning, the woman returned. Tom had been walking the edges of the property, keeping an eye out, and when he spotted her approaching from the direction of the creek, he felt a rush of relief. She carried nothing this time, moving lightly and gracefully across the grass, but her presence alone was enough to calm him. "Good morning," Tom said, raising his hand in greeting. I don't know how to thank you enough." The woman smiled faintly, tilting her head in acknowledgement. She didn't speak much, but her actions were already doing what words could not. She nodded toward the cabin, and Tom understood that she intended to help again. He guided her inside, careful to avoid startling the baby, who had just begun to stir again. Inside, she knelt beside Samuel, studying the baby's tiny hands and face with care. Tom and Mary watched as she adjusted the baby's blanket, her fingers gentle and precise. She hummed the same soft tune as yesterday, and Samuel's small eyes fluttered closed again. The sound seemed to calm him, a magical rhythm that spoke directly to his needs. After a while, the woman gestured toward the milk. Tom fetched a small amount from the cooler, and she began to feed Samuel again. It was a slow, careful process, and both Tom and Mary were grateful to simply watch, trusting her completely. They had never met anyone like her, someone so skilled, so patient, and yet so gentle. When the baby was full and content, the woman turned to Tom and gestured for him to follow her outside. Curiosity mixed with caution, but Tom stepped forward, eager to learn more. She led him to the edge of the barn where the earth was soft and damp from the morning dew. She pointed to a small patch of wild plants growing near the fence and began to explain, slowly, how to use them. "These are good for strength," she said, her words careful and deliberate. "Oil the leaves, drink the water. It helps the body. The baby can have a little when he is older. It helps you, too." Tom listened intently, absorbing every word. He had always considered himself knowledgeable about the land, but he realized that his understanding was limited. This woman knew things he had never imagined: plants that could heal, water that could strengthen, and the ways of the prairie that could sustain life when the land seemed harsh and unforgiving. She stayed with them throughout the day, moving from task to task with quiet efficiency. She helped Mary prepare more milk for Samuel, teaching her how to warm it gently and how to keep it safe. She showed Tom how to tend to the cow, how to check for signs of illness, and how to use small natural remedies to help the animals stay healthy. With every lesson, Tom's admiration grew, and with it, a deepening sense of trust. By late afternoon, Tom realized that the woman had become more than just a helper. She was a teacher, a guide, and perhaps even a protector. He watched her as she moved around the ranch, her presence calm but commanding. She didn't demand attention, yet she held it, naturally and effortlessly. It was clear that she understood the land and the people on it in ways he could only hope to learn. Mary approached him quietly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "She's amazing," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done without her." Tom nodded, unable to find words that fully captured what he felt. "She's not just amazing," he said softly. I don't know her name yet, but she saved our baby. More than that, she's given us hope." The woman overheard this and gave a small smile, though she remained silent. She gestured toward the kitchen, indicating that it was time to prepare supper. Tom and Mary worked alongside her, following her instructions and learning from her careful movements. Even simple tasks, like chopping vegetables or preparing the milk, became lessons in patience and attention. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the prairie, Tom felt a quiet sense of wonder. He had always thought of himself as a man who understood hard work, who knew the land and how to survive on it. But this woman had shown him that survival was not just about labor. It was about knowledge, patience, and understanding the natural world. She had brought a new perspective, one that would change the way he cared for his family and his ranch forever. After supper, the woman sat by the fire outside the cabin, watching the baby sleep peacefully inside. Tom and Mary joined her, sitting quietly and letting the warmth of the flames wash over them. For the first time in days, they felt a sense of peace, a feeling that life was beginning to stabilize. Tom looked at the woman and realized something important. She was no longer just a stranger. She had become part of their lives in a meaningful way. Her presence had brought life, knowledge, and care into their home. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that she had earned a place in their hearts. The woman's eyes met his, and for the first time, she spoke a few words. "Family, important," she said simply, her voice soft but firm. Tom nodded, understanding her meaning without needing a translation. She had saved Samuel, taught them about the land, and brought them hope. In her own way, she was already family. Night fell, and the prairie grew quiet once more. The stars shone bright in the clear sky, reflecting in Tom's eyes as he thought about the day's events. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for the woman who had entered their lives so unexpectedly. He didn't know her past, her name, or where she had come from, but he knew one thing: she had changed their lives forever. Mary leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you think she'll stay?" she asked quietly. Tom didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The way she had moved, the way she had cared for Samuel, and the way she had taught them about the land all spoke louder than words. Somehow, he knew she would remain in their lives, at least as long as they needed her, and perhaps longer. As they sat together in the fading light, the wind whispering through the tall grass, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. The ranch, the land, and their family were all still fragile, still in need of care and protection. But now they were not alone. The woman had arrived, bringing knowledge, compassion, and strength. And in that moment, Tom Hawkins knew that with her by their side, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and harsh, quiet and full of life. Tom looked at the horizon, at the fading colors of the sunset, and felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. Life was fragile, yes, but it was also full of unexpected gifts. And sometimes those gifts came in the form of a stranger who showed up at exactly the right moment, bringing hope, knowledge, and the beginnings of a new family. The days that followed were different from any Tom Hawkins had experienced before. The ranch, which had always been a place of hard work and endless worry, now felt alive with a new rhythm. The woman who had appeared at the creek, whom they still did not know by name, was no longer just a visitor. She had become part of the household, her presence woven into the daily life of the cabin. Each morning she would arrive with the first light, moving quietly but with purpose. She had taught Mary how to prepare the baby's milk more efficiently, using a small stove and fresh water from the creek. Samuel's health improved steadily. His cheeks grew rosy, and his small body gained strength day by day. Tom watched these changes with awe and relief, realizing that the woman had not only saved his son's life, but had also given them all a sense of stability they had not known in weeks. She did not speak much, but her actions spoke volumes. She moved through the cabin with ease, knowing exactly what needed to be done, whether it was gathering water, checking the cow, or helping with household chores. She showed Mary how to prepare simple remedies from the plants around the ranch, herbs that could soothe the baby's tummy, roots that could strengthen Tom after long days of labor, and leaves that could heal small cuts or scratches. Tom had always prided himself on his knowledge of the land, but as he worked alongside her, he realized how much he still had to learn. She taught him how to read the signs of the weather in the clouds, and the wind, how to track the movements of animals to know where the best grazing would be, and how to find water even in the driest months. Each lesson was small but important, a quiet magic that made the ranch seem less harsh and more alive. The older children, Emily and Jack, were initially cautious. They had never seen anyone like her before, someone so quiet, strong, and sure of herself. But they were drawn to her gentle nature. She would kneel to their level when she spoke, showing them how to help with the animals, how to identify plants, and even how to play simple games using sticks, stones, and the natural world around them. Slowly they began to trust her, following her instructions, and learning from her without fear. One afternoon, Tom watched as the woman led Samuel and the older children to the creek. The baby, now stronger, could sit in a small basket she had lined with soft blankets, while she showed Emily and Jack how to gather safe herbs for food and medicine. Her hands were steady as she demonstrated, and her voice, though quiet, was clear and patient. Tom felt a deep respect for her skill and wisdom. She was not just teaching, they were learning how to live in harmony with the land, to respect it and understand it in ways they had never known before. Evenings were a time for quiet reflection. After the day's work was done, the family would gather around the small fireplace inside the cabin. The woman would sit nearby, often humming softly while the children played, or helping Mary with chores. Sometimes she would sit outside, staring at the stars, as if listening to the land itself. Tom would watch her from the doorway, feeling a sense of gratitude he could not put into words. She had entered their lives quietly, but her presence was transforming them all. As the days turned into weeks, The woman became more than just a helper. She became a teacher, a guide, and in ways that Tom did not fully understand, a part of their family. Her knowledge of the land was unmatched, her care for the baby unwavering, and her quiet strength gave them all a sense of security. Tom began to rely on her wisdom in ways he had never relied on anyone before, asking her advice on the cattle, the crops, and even how to prepare for the harsh winters that were always approaching. One morning, as the sun rose behind the distant mountains, Tom noticed the children playing near the barn with the woman. Emily was laughing as she followed the woman's instructions to balance on a fallen log, while Jack attempted to mimic the careful movements she showed him when tending to the chickens. Samuel, now strong enough to sit up and reach for small objects, gurgled happily from a basket lined with soft blankets. Tom felt a swell of pride and relief. The family was thriving in ways he had not dared to imagine just weeks before. Mary joined him on the porch, her hands busy with the preparation of breakfast. "She's changed everything," she said softly, her eyes following the scene in the yard. "I never thought we could feel so safe, so hopeful." Tom nodded, his thoughts reflecting hers. "I know," he said. She's remarkable. I can't imagine our lives without her now." The woman overheard their conversation, but did not speak. Instead, she continued her work with calm efficiency, as if words were unnecessary. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. She prepared the baby's milk, tended to the animals, and guided the older children with patience and skill. Each day she became more deeply rooted in their lives, and each day the family grew stronger because of her presence. As time passed, the bond between the woman and the children deepened. Emily and Jack began to follow her everywhere, eager to learn and to be near her. She taught them about the stars, how to track the sun across the sky, and how to listen to the wind to understand the weather. She showed them which plants were edible and which were medicinal, and even taught them to respect the animals as part of the land, not just as creatures to be used. The children learned quickly, captivated by her knowledge and gentle authority. One afternoon, Tom found the woman sitting with Samuel on a soft blanket near the creek, the baby's small hands reaching for her fingers. She was humming the same gentle tune that had soothed him when he was first sick. Tom watched from a distance, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This woman had entered their lives unexpectedly, but she had brought care, wisdom, and love. She was more than a helper. She was family. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the prairie, Tom realized that life on the ranch had changed forever. The land was still harsh, the work still demanding, but the presence of this woman had transformed their home. The children laughed and played, Samuel was healthy and growing, and Mary and Tom felt a sense of security they had not known in weeks. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of life, learning, and hope. That evening, the family gathered around the fire once more. The woman sat nearby, watching the children, her eyes calm and observant. Tom looked at her and felt a deep respect, knowing that she had given them something far greater than milk or simple help. She had given them knowledge, strength, and a sense of family. Mary leaned against Tom, her hands clasped together. "She's part of us now," she said softly, almost to herself. Tom nodded, his heart full. "Yes," he said, "she is family. She's become the heart of this place." The prairie stretched endlessly around them. Quiet now in the darkness, stars shimmered in the clear sky, reflecting the light in their eyes. The ranch, once a place of struggle and fear, now felt alive with possibility. Life was still fragile, still demanding, but with the woman's guidance and care, Tom knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as they settled into the cabin for the night, the children sleeping peacefully, Samuel in his crib, and Mary by Tom's side, the woman watched from the doorway. Her presence was steady and quiet, a constant reminder that even in the harshest places, kindness, knowledge, and courage could create a family where none had existed before. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the day lift. The ranch, the land, and the family were all stronger now, bound together not just by blood or work, but by trust, care, and the quiet strength of a remarkable woman who had chosen to make them her family. The ranch had changed. Tom Hawkins stood on the porch of his small wooden cabin, looking out over the rolling plains bathed in the golden light of early morning. The wind blew softly across the prairie, carrying the smell of fresh grass, earth, and wildflowers. For the first time in many weeks, he felt a quiet peace. Life had not been easy, and the land could still be harsh and unforgiving, but his family was thriving, and the future seemed brighter than it had in a long time. Samuel, his youngest, was now strong and healthy. The tiny baby who had cried weakly for milk in those desperate first days now laughed and cooed, reaching for his mother's hands and exploring the world with bright, curious eyes. Tom watched as Mary rocked him gently, her face glowing with happiness and relief. The sight filled Tom's heart with gratitude. He had feared the worst, but thanks to the woman who had appeared at the creek, his child had a chance to grow, to live, and to know a family that loved him deeply. The woman, whom they still did not know by her true name, moved about the ranch with quiet confidence. She had become more than a helper. She had become part of the family. She helped Tom check the cattle, taught the children about the land, and prepared food with a care and skill that made the work seem lighter. The family relied on her guidance, but more importantly, they trusted her completely. Her presence had transformed the ranch from a place of struggle to a place of life, learning, and warmth. That morning, she led the older children, Emily and Jack, to a small grove near the creek. They carried baskets with them, eager to gather wild herbs and fruits, following her instructions carefully. She showed them which berries were safe to eat, which leaves could be used for tea, and how to identify small plants that could help with health. The children laughed and learned, their eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. Tom watched from the cabin, smiling. It was rare to see them so engaged, so happy, and he realized that the woman had not only helped his family survive, but had given them the gift of joy and knowledge. Mary joined him on the porch, leaning against the railing with a soft sigh. "She's made everything different," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I never imagined someone could change our lives so much." Tom nodded, watching the children and the woman work together. "She's more than anyone could have hoped for," he said quietly. "She's part of this family now. I can feel it." By midday, the woman returned with the children to the cabin, baskets full of fresh herbs and small vegetables. She helped Mary prepare a meal, using the bounty of the land with skill and care. The kitchen, once a place of struggle and worry, now felt warm and inviting. The smell of fresh food, herbs, and baked bread filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and chatter. After the meal, Tom called the family together outside. He wanted to take a moment to reflect on all that had happened since the woman had appeared at the creek. He looked at her, at Mary, at the children, and finally at Samuel, who was now sitting up in a small chair watching everything with wide eyes. "I don't know how to say this," Tom began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "The last few weeks have been hard, harder than anything I've ever faced. But thanks to this woman, who has become part of our family, we've found hope, we've found strength, and most of all, we've found a way to live in a place that is beautiful but can be unforgiving." The woman looked at him quietly, her dark eyes steady and calm. She said nothing, but her presence spoke volumes. She had given them life, knowledge, and care, and her actions had shown her love and commitment to their family. Emily ran to the woman and hugged her tightly, her small arms wrapping around the woman's waist. Jack followed, laughing, as he tugged at her hand. Samuel reached for her, cooing happily. Tom and Mary exchanged a glance, their hearts full. The woman had become family in the truest sense, not by blood, but by love, care, and shared experience. The afternoon passed peacefully. Tom and the woman checked the cattle together, making sure the herd was healthy and that the fences were secure. The children played nearby, their laughter carrying across the prairie. Mary tended the garden, guided by the woman's knowledge of plants and herbs. The ranch was alive with activity, but it was no longer a place of desperation or fear. It was a place of life, hope, and family. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of gold, pink, and orange, Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude. The woman had not only saved Samuel's life, but she had also taught them all the value of patience, understanding, and respect for the land. She had shown them that survival was about more than hard work. It was about knowledge, compassion, and connection. That evening, the family gathered around the fire outside the cabin. Samuel slept peacefully in his crib nearby, and the children were quiet, listening to the gentle crackle of the flames. Tom looked at the woman, sitting with her hands folded in her lap, and realized something profound. She had become the heart of their family. She had earned their trust, their respect, and their love. Mary leaned against him, her hand resting on his arm. "She's part of us now," she whispered. Tom nodded, his eyes fixed on the woman. "Yes," he said softly, "she's more than part of us. She's family. And I don't know what we would do without her." The stars began to appear in the clear night sky, twinkling above the prairie. The wind whispered softly through the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth, herbs, and the promise of tomorrow. Tom felt a sense of peace he had not known in weeks. The ranch, once a place of struggle and worry, was now a place of hope and life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The ranch thrived under their combined care. The cow that had once stopped giving milk returned to health, providing fresh milk for the family. The garden flourished with herbs, vegetables, and fruits. The cattle were strong and healthy, and the children grew happier and more confident each day. The woman continued to guide them, teaching them about the land, the animals, and the rhythms of nature. Samuel grew quickly, his laughter filling the cabin and the prairie beyond. He learned to crawl, then to walk, and soon he could run across the yard, always under the watchful eyes of the woman and his family. Tom and Mary watched with pride and gratitude, knowing that their son's life had been saved and that he had been given a childhood full of love, safety, and knowledge. One morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Tom gathered the family together near the creek. He looked at the woman, at Mary, at the children, and finally at Samuel, who reached for the water with wide eyes. "Life on this ranch has not always been easy," Tom said quietly, "but with the love, guidance, and care we've received, we've found strength we didn't know we had. We've learned that family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who stands with you, who cares for you, and who shares your life." The woman smiled faintly, her dark eyes meeting his. She reached out and touched Samuel's small hand, a gesture full of love and protection. Tom felt a warmth in his heart that he had never known before. The woman had given them more than survival. She had given them life, hope, and the beginnings of a true family. As the family settled for the night, the prairie around them quiet and still, Tom looked out at the horizon. The ranch was alive with possibilities, and the family was stronger than ever. He knew there would be challenges ahead, storms, harsh winters, and the hard work of life, but he also knew they would face them together. The woman had become a part of their family, a guiding presence, and a source of strength. Her knowledge, patience, and love had transformed their lives, and in her quiet way she had shown them the true meaning of family. And as the stars twinkled above, the prairie stretching endlessly into the distance, Tom Hawkins knew one thing for certain. Life had given them a second chance, and together they would face whatever came next.